and the United States Supreme Court declares segregation on interstate buses and trains unconstitutional. For Thurgood Marshall, now the chief attorney for the NAACP, the time has finally come to strike directly at the heart of legal segregation. Marshall looks for black families in a few local communities courageous enough to sue for integrated schools in the federal courts. In 1951, the NAACP unexpectedly discovers one of those communities in Farmville, Virginia, deep in the tobacco-growing region of Prince Edward County.
The black community in Farmville, Virginia in the 1950s, in the late 40s, was an ambitious community. And it seemed that, in fact, you know, the public school system was what I refer to as a great engine. The black public schools were a great engine of achievement and ambition on the part of students.
I credit where I am today to what I got in high school. I didn't need an integrated education. I didn't need an integrated student body to get a good education. Our teachers, I mean, they were on us all the time. It wasn't about sitting beside a given person, it was about a quality education, and we could no longer get the quality education we needed in this building because we had grown out of the building.
We never saw the white schools inside.
I had no idea what the high school was like. And when I walked over there, and this still blows my mind, they had like an atrium in the center of the school. We could walk out of the cafeteria and kind of sit in a garden and eat. Damn, we didn't even have a cafeteria, let alone where you could go after you got your food. But I just couldn't believe that this is what they had for a building. And I'm sitting up there with an umbrella up on rainy days so the ink wouldn't run on my paper.
It's just really difficult to kind of know how to think about yourself when you can't go to the public school because you're not good enough, when you can't get basic services because you're not good enough. This kind of psychic harm. I mean, there's a lot of real economic harms and physical harms, but it's the psychic harm that really makes you begin to disrespect yourself.
We wanted so much here and had so little, and we had talents and abilities here that weren't really being realized, and I thought that was a tragic shame. And that's basically what motivated me to want to see some change take place here.
In 1951, Barbara Johns, then a 16-year-old junior and niece of activist Reverend Vernon Johns, decides to organize a student strike at the Robert Russa Moulton High School.
There wasn't any fear. I just felt, this is your moment, seize it.
Barbara had decided, she and the other student leaders had decided that this is what they were going to do. They were going to get a representative from each grade and have that person be responsible for telling the other students. And she emphasized that we should keep it a secret.
Mr. Jones was the principal. We had to get him off campus because we knew if Mr. Jones was on campus, there was no way there was going to be a strike. He was a very strong leader and very highly respected man. So we went home and we pretended we were businessmen calling in, telling him that some students were downtown making disturbances and would he please come down and take care of it. When one of us saw him, then that person called the other two and said, well, he's gone, and we all came, and the three of us came back to the campus.
When we got to the assembly, Barbara came in and walked up on the stage, and I remember saying to myself, what is going on? Why is she up there? And she started to talk, and she was talking so forcefully, and she told us about how the conditions were very bad at the school, and you know, she needed everyone's cooperation, and she realized this was a surprise, but they had to keep it that way so that it wouldn't leak, and that only a few people knew about it.
Barbara started out, of course, And then we just talked and told them, strike the school.
And it became a cheering session. What do you want to do? We want to strike. When do you want to strike? Today, you know, and all this. So it really was a rallying situation.
I remember sitting in my seat and sort of cowering down because I couldn't believe it, first of all. The first reaction I had was fear. I thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to us now?
Everyone, a lot of people were scared. Some of Barbara's closest friends were scared to death for her. They said, why did you do that? She says, we have to make a change. And I mean, right now. You know, Barbara was very dynamic when she wasn't quiet.
The students marched down the street to the superintendent's office.
We come in the office, and this poor secretary almost had a heart attack. So she goes, tells Mr. McElwain that these students are here, so we go in his office. He promised he was going to rain down the wrath of God on all of us for what we were doing, and our parents were going to lose their jobs.
He said, you're upstarts. And you know, you need to go ahead back to school before all your parents are in jail. And this is what frightened us when he said our parents are going to jail. And a member of my family says, how big is the Farmville jail? And that was it. From that point on, there was no stopping for us.
The initial reaction was to cut off the economic livelihood of folk, and that, of course, was going to bring them in line. And, you know, Mr. Jones, the principal, was fired. Mama was fired, and Daddy was fired.
Our cross was burned in our yard after the school strike, and my parents sent Barbara to Montgomery, Alabama to live with my Uncle Vernon because they were afraid for her life, because they had received threats.
Responding to the crisis, NAACP lawyers come to Farmville to assess the resolve of the community.
It was just like my watching Jackie Robinson in Ebbsfield. It was the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. And they came in there, and they were really and truly behind us. They were astounded to find that these people who had been dormant and quiet for so long were ready to back their children. Then, of course, Spotswood Robinson spoke up. And he says, if you're really ready to back them, then you have to sign this petition. And that's when we found out how we could separate the wheat from the chaff in the black community, because some of the blacks didn't sign.
The NAACP takes up the students' cause, adding the Farmville case to a series of suits that will take the Roosa-Moulton Students' Challenge to Jim Crow all the way to the United States Supreme Court. In a case known as Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court upheld the Farmville students' claim for better schools. Speaking for the unanimous court, Chief Justice Earl Warren declared, in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place.